And to speak about some of these issues, we're joined now by political analyst and governance expert, Mr. Sandile Swana. Mr. Swana, let's perhaps just start with that issue, the deployment of the military at various Eskom sites. Some would say there's reading between the lines that need to be done, given the fact that the ANC itself has admitted experiencing major delays as a result of the power cuts on credentials, but the Eskom problem seeming to also loom large over the statement it makes about the capacity and efficacy of the ANC leadership. What are your thoughts about this deployment, and what is it really saying?
The deployment, in reading the newspapers, I think even Helen Zille stated it differently, and I'm not sure that they are doing what Helen Zille said. Because Helen Zille said, if you say there is sabotage at the power stations, at Eskom, then you need to deploy the military. Now, if on the other hand, and this is my part now, if on the other hand what we're talking about is crime, then the agencies that are created to deal with crime in South Africa need to be deployed. The military, people in the military are trained very differently to people who are in the business of combating crime. Now, the president and the Minister of Public Enterprise and the Minister of Defense need to give us the risk analysis report that they have done in order to determine what type of personnel would be best suited to address this matter. So at this stage, the nation has not been educated about that. This then feeds into the idea that, and the complaint in actual fact, from major intellectuals in South Africa and academics, that a lot of what are government interventions, including policies, are not evidence-based. In other words, there's no scientific basis behind many of the programs and policies and so on of the African National Congress. This might be just another knee-jerk reaction, in fact, a publicity standard, even that.
It's interesting that you say that. We heard the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, saying the tariffs on Eskom will inform the way forward, but this is against the backdrop of him reiterating that they are still going to take on 2/3 of Eskom debt. This is also against the backdrop of Eskom in the middle of needing a new leader after Andre de Ruyter has stepped down. And a major part of that problem, according to detractors, has been how the ANC has operated on governance issues for Eskom. So this conference, how will it help come full circle, particularly as you talk about policy directives and implementation?
This issue of the debts of Eskom and where those debts must go, for instance, if those debts would be taken over by National Treasury, is long. There are many top economists in this country who advised that long ago. Now, the problem is that some of these economic and financial problems at Eskom have remained untreated for a long time. So if you take the same treatment that you've needed to have taken 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you take it now, the problems have deepened in the meantime. So that's the other side of the story. So there is a need at Eskom, because it's not the first time that this government has said they are intervening at Eskom. I think the rate is probably another 3-year intervention. Hardly 3 years. There's a short period that has been there. He came with the Tumamina Brigade. So there are a lot of difficulties, and we have not been given the assurance that proper due diligence has been put in place by National Treasury, by the Minister of Public Enterprises, to make sure that this is the last time we're going through this again.
I want to look at some of the names that have already been suggested as successors to Andre de Ruyter. There's Commissioner Edward Kieswetter, the SARS Commissioner, former Eskom CEO Jacob Marocha, Brian Damas, Mpho Makwana. Your thoughts on this? Some are saying it's a poisoned chalice. So those who would be chosen, if it were among these names, would they follows suit in terms of following the beat of the drum of the African National Congress. We had the minister there saying the leader at the helm of the ANC doesn't really matter in terms of micro or macroeconomic policy. Is that really the case? And I'm saying this if we're looking at the new Eskom CEO and what he has to preside over. Is it true that they would have the autonomy, if we're to believe what Mr. Kotongwana is suggesting, that it's not necessarily about the individual, but about the collective leadership and plan?
No, I don't think the individual matters. The individual who becomes the CEO of Eskom matters. Now, there is a problem here, which is that what is your philosophy of leadership? For instance, the British tried this thing of the bright or the competent amateur, whereby if you are a generally bright guy or a bright fellow, you'd just be invited to come and be the CEO of anything. So you could have majored in music at university and you find yourself being the CEO of Eskom. And they've tried, the British tried this, and I think it was around 1969, 1968 when they abandoned this style of leadership that we're now using here in South Africa, of using competent amateurs to run institutions. So that one has been tried and tested, and it has failed us even here in South Africa. In the list that you provided there, I suppose there's a reason why you provided that list. The people who actually studied engineering there, and as far as I know for sure, Marucha did study engineering and he has practiced in power systems, specifically heavy current and power systems. I suspect Brian Dames has got that background. The other fellows have got no business trying to run Eskom in that list, such as Mpo and Kiswater. So those ones are irrelevant to this discussion. And let me add this, that around 1983, 82, Eskom, if you read the records, Eskom was a disgrace to South Africa. Eskom was in total crisis. And a strategy was found to turn Eskom around. So when this government took over power in 1994, they took over power of an Eskom that had been turned into a world-class organization from a position of disgrace. So the position we're in now, we've been in before, and there was a way of coming out. So all of those lessons appear to me to be ignored completely by the current leadership. But there are individuals with relevant capabilities who must be put there. This idea of collective leadership comes after you've appointed competent people to do the job.
I want to conjoin the two themes before we actually move on to the order of business, what we believe this conference was to be about. You know, there was the semantic debate over, is it an elective Congress? Is it a national Congress? If it's a national Congress, what does a national Congress do? Does it look at policy? And thus far, we've seen endless hours of delays. Will there be much time to do anything else, given the fact that the selection process, nomination and voting for the top six has not even begun, and it's past 9 on Saturday evening?
Yes, your question is very relevant, Tsepi. The truth here is that 2 days have been wasted on verifying who should be at that conference. So stated differently, these people are inviting what they make us to believe are members of the ANC that they know. When they get there, they don't appear to know the members of the ANC and spend the first 2 days of the conference dealing with that issue. If you look at the program, they are nowhere near the program that they had actually published when this conference started. 2 days has been lost already. So this conference is, no matter what you want to do, it's about election, who becomes the leader. The policies will just be rubber stamped, and then those guys will go and implement whatever is called a policy out of this conference.
Well, let's listen to what was said earlier on in terms of the ANC, the position it finds itself in. The national spokesperson, Pule Mabe, says the organization needs to be better prepared for the upcoming elections.
If a position did not exist, to form part of the national officials, and that position is now being introduced. It means that nominations for that position will be called from the floor. And all of the names that qualified for that position would then be included on the ballot paper. What has been practiced is that when we need to deal with commissions and voting, we give the electoral committee and the electoral commission, which is an independent body appointed to run the electoral processes of the ANC, the space to prepare the ballot paper, time allowing. And when you start voting, if time permits, you would then draw your delegates, those that qualify to vote, out of commissions, if those are ongoing, to go and cast their votes. The practice has always been that we allow people to vote according to their provinces. We are still hoping to have all of this happen tonight.
So I see you shaking your head there, Mr. Swana. Do you think that that is a pipe dream?
Well, I'm now here in Auckland Park. I've spent a lot of time at Nazareth. That is a pipe dream. And Mr. Mabe has been calling those briefings like that one, when the progress is actually not happening, and calling the journalists and the analysts into the room there and brief us, but actually the progress in the registration and verification and so on is very little.
And I want to look at that process. We heard Mr. Mabe talk about the Electoral Commission. We had some members of the NEC raise disputes, particularly around the elections agency, which runs the elections for the ANC, questions around its credibility and conflict of interest being suggested over the people who run it, the agencies, Bontle Mbakanyane and Dren Newpen, both whom have had large amounts of experience in facilitating elections with political parties, corporates and NGOs. But now their proximity, as it were, to President Cyril Ramaphosa is being brought into question. But the Elections Commission has rubbished this. But how much of these peripheral issues are actually forcing the process to stumble?
Yes, the thing is that if these people trusted each other and they had easily verifiable systems, for instance, as I'm sitting here, would Maben be able to determine if I'm a member of the ANC or not? Or any other person, because Makura, on the other hand, in their own Gauteng conference, said it was normal for miscellaneous people to be found in the conference, in their provincial conferences. So the problem now is that they know that they smuggle people into these conferences. That is known. They know that they cook a lot of these processes. All of them know this, and some of them have been cooking processes.
And I want to please explain this to us, how, because obviously there's what we hear, then there's the spin, and then there's a contrary view, and it's sometimes very difficult to know whom to believe. We heard earlier on, I think it was early in the day, that we had Dakota Lohote say that no, the credentials business is done and over with. Then earlier on we heard Nomvula Mkonyane say, well, we're still dealing with these issues. In some cases, we've had people who've grabbed their accreditation before they're supposed to. What are, the vulnerabilities in the system, the vettings, the system itself, the security around it? And as you say, some of these things I understood should have been done a long time ago at regional, branch levels. Why is it we hear Dakota Lohote say, well, because of load shedding, we have to start the system again and ingest the information again? That all sounds to me rather archaic.
Yeah, I think that the ANC is taking us into an unknown world. The idea of membership systems is there. So, for instance, our gyms here in South Africa have members. Golf clubs have got members to the point that you could be a member of this club, but you have a right to play in any other club anywhere in the country, and similarly to the gyms. And they are not confused who's their member and who's not their member. And the ruling party, which is running the largest economy in Southern Africa, is saying that they can't determine membership, their own membership, and so on. So there is a problem here. The problem cannot be technological. South Africa is one of the most advanced countries in the field of information systems, which is what we're dealing with here. The professors at WITS in IT or DUJ or University of Pretoria could have helped this thing long ago and solved it completely without any loopholes. So these loopholes must come from somewhere else. They can't be technological. They cannot be that South Africa does not have a knowledge how to run membership system. So they come from the humans, the type of humans that are running the processes of the ANC.
Just very briefly, your predictions on when we will get to this point of the voting of the top 6?
It's tomorrow. They will be busy with it tomorrow.
Will they get to it tomorrow?
I think they will get to it tomorrow, but obviously they will have, now they will be on the 3rd day. So the time for the policies, as Pulemabe says, if time permits. If you listen to him, he says, if time permits, if time permits. So basically this takes us to 2012, where the people who are there, as Thabang Makwetla called them in 2012, that they are just voting cattle and they've got no contribution to the policy, which was a major part of this.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us, governance expert and political analyst, Mr. Sandile Swana. We're going to leave it there for now. We are back again with more news here on The Globe. Do stay.